Hi everyone, and welcome to today's Pretty Little Joys podcast. I am so excited to be doing this, as this is my first time ever doing a podcast episode for Pretty Little Joys, and I'm super passionate about today's topic. First of all, thank you all for listening, and thank you for joining. Today, we're going to be speaking about mental health, more importantly, checking in on yourself, and we chat to some really wonderful people later on in the episode. I'm a South African, and I'm also an activity head for the Pretty Little Joys team, and I'm extremely passionate about mental health and mental wellness. I really want to educate people and make them aware about mental illnesses and how their mental health may be affected by their life. Often we don't realize symptoms of mental illnesses or bad mental health, and we don't often see it around us, and that's where I choose to help educate people and make people aware of symptoms and experiences that people may be going through around them. Mental health is something that's come up a lot more recently in media, and a lot more people are talking about it, but you'll still find stigma surrounding the topic. Many people are scared to admit to themselves that they are affected by a mental illness or that their mental health is under strain, especially with the pandemic around us. Often we overload ourselves with stress and schoolwork and attribute our unhappiness to stress, but it can often be caused by mental illness. And things like huge life changes, such as the pandemic, can bring around symptoms of anxiety and depression. We sat down with therapist Debayer, and she spoke to us about how the pandemic has affected mental health and how we can better ourselves with our mental health. Also, she gave us some tips on how to check in on yourself and your mental wellness.
It's Debayer here, psychologist, parent expert, and author of the book How to Raise a Man. I'm delighted to be on your podcast, and I thought we could kick off with 3 minutes on stress. With all the changes going on, the worry about the pandemic, and these incredible lifestyle changes where we've been in lockdown, online a lot, and cut off from our normal lifestyle activities, it's caused a lot of stress for people. This shows up in negative and worrying thoughts. It shows up in unusual emotions, either feeling this kind of free-floating anxiety or feelings of depression and being down. It also shows up in our body, and this is where it can be really odd symptoms like clenching the jaw at night, sweating. We could have bad dreams. We could find that just generally our body might begin to kind of ache or pain. And we even have these kind of ideas that we got coronavirus because it shows up in by lowering our immune system, so we can end up with colds. So what is stress? Stress is an ancient pathway. It's there to help us flee from danger, to fight danger, or to find a mechanism called freeze, where we just go very still, like a small steenbok or rabbit in the headlights, pretending that no one can see us. So we have these ancient pathways within our own system. And so what are sort of some of the reasons why are we feeling the stress? I think the big thing is to face that there's a lot of unknowns. We're worried about the future. We don't know what's going to happen. Our work's been affected, our scheduling, but most of all, for teenagers, socializing and enjoying yourself is a really big, important part of this developmental stage, and when that's not happening, it can cause all sorts of stresses. So what to do? I think the first thing is really important to feel the strange feelings. Just show up for your feelings. Do some deep breathing. Feel into the solar plexus, the tummy, know what's going on in your body and be able to name those feelings. I quite like the idea of keeping a daily record. Whatever you do, be kind towards yourself. Show up with kindness towards all these unusual feelings flowing through your system. Talk things through with a buddy. And if that's not possible, then definitely keep a diary. Talk to someone you trust, though. Be honest, reach out, and try and stay connected, even if it is through Zoom or online. Make a self-care plan. You need to develop your mindfulness practice, breathing, going out in nature, getting your bare feet onto the grass, standing under this beautiful, big, wide open blue sky and just breathing it in. Listen to the birds. Nature is incredibly good at calming the nervous system, but you need to get your eating right, your exercise right, your calming routines right as well, so that your body can be at its best to cope with stress. Definitely achieve something daily. Find something that you love and set a commitment to do something new and creative every single day, even if it's just planting a seed in a pot or taking your dog for a walk, deciding to paint something, sketch something, or to write a poem. Check in with your thoughts. Stop looking at the dramatic news. Find websites and find some online stuff that makes you feel good. I think too much social media can lead to a lot of FOMO and worrisome thoughts, and it's not helpful at all. Ask yourself, is what I'm thinking right now helpful? Is it uplifting or is it pulling me down? Accept more and react less. Calm your thoughts. Don't forget your practices like dancing, listening to music, just doing those acts that you absolutely enjoy, making tea slowly, savor your meal, smile at someone, begin a gratitude diary to write down the things that you really are grateful for. So don't forget that stress shows up in the body, it shows up in thoughts, it shows up in feelings, and it also shows up in our reactions. But start somewhere. If it's difficult to work with your thoughts, then work with calming your body. If that's tough, then at least feel your feelings and be able to name them and talk that through with a buddy. So I hope these tips help, and I look forward to speaking to you again.
Our next speaker is Keylans. Chris and I have known each other for a couple of years, and I've worked with him on a couple projects and with him in the past, but I'll leave it up to him to introduce what he does and who he is. Take it away, Chris.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. So, like you said, my name is Christopher, and I'm the founding member of Simple Change, which is a mental health organization focusing on mental health education, mental health destigmatization, suicide prevention, and suicide awareness. And I know it's a lot, but there's a lot to fix. And we have many different things that we work on. We work on mental health and attachment to literacy and the environment. We do mental health workshops to promote mental health education. We work with the government to implement mental health policies in schools. And we also work on our activism side of things, where we basically get the stubborn adults to make a difference and to use their power that they have, because unfortunately the adults are the only one that can make physical change now. But hopefully that's soon to change, where the youth get more power and more voice. But in short, that's what Simple Change does.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Chris. Chris is a literal powerhouse with everything to do, following his passions and inspiring people. So, Chris, what inspired you to start Simple Change? What did you notice around you that made you want to start something that can create change and movement?
So in the beginning, when we were trying to figure out, what are we wanting to start? What do we want to spend our time focusing on a specific thing? Because there's so much you wanted to help, but you got to unpack on what you actually want to focus all your time and effort onto. And we had our different ideas from, we're looking at poverty and looking at animals and education, environment, and mental health. And, we said to ourselves that there is a lot of organizations focusing on things like poverty, like the homeless shelters, and animals, looking at the animal shelters, and places like Dog and Tears and education. There's a lot of nonprofits working on education. And there's a lot of nonprofits working on environment and climate change. But when looking at mental health, we saw that there was a few organizations working on mental health, but they were focused majority towards the adults and not enough to the youth. And you go onto their websites, whatever the case may be, and you're scrolling through and you want to find some information on like bipolar disorder, for example. And it's like these fat paragraphs with like Arial font 14 and big words that like the youth don't know what half these words mean. I don't know what half these words mean. I don't have the time to sit here and scroll through like 3 pages of information, and I just want to find out like a 1-line question or answer to my question. And we realized that it's so difficult for youth to find help or resources within mental health. And there was no one focusing on youth mental health. And we decided that let's focus all our attention onto youth mental health because that's where the need is most. And it's something we are passionate about. So it's something we can drive, and at the same time, it can drive us. So we had to decide, we had to find that passion and also realize that we want to help all the other things, but you got to decide what's needed most in your community and what you're also most passionate for.
No, I completely agree. It's quite a lot of people are saying more recently that mental health awareness and movements to try make mental health education more accessible to everyone has been coming up a lot more recently. Would you call it a movement? And what part of this movement or push to get more education out for everyone, what part of that is the most challenging for you, do you think?
I'd like to say, looking at climate change, for example, we realized that, people were working on climate change for a long time. And then last year we had a massive movement towards climate change. We had a whole lot of protests going on, a whole lot of awareness being made. And it was incredible to see all this motion happening. And I think now after, well, not after, we're still stuck in the middle of COVID, but in the beginning, we realized the need of mental health and how important it became throughout the pandemic, because it was a health pandemic, but it also became a mental health pandemic throughout the time. And the rate of suicide rates spiked, and because obviously it was difficult to see your counselors, you're spending a lot of time by yourself, not seeing family, not seeing friends. It's a whole lot, and it's a lot of time in your own head. So I definitely feel throughout this time, the movement towards mental health education and mental health, as a whole, has definitely started to grow. We've Some for Change got a partnership with the South African College of Applied Psychology, who helps us with our workshops, and they qualified students basically free of charge create these workshops and present it to our whichever students we want. And this is where we realize that how important the education aspect is to it. That we're looking at a college in South Africa that focuses on psychology is wanting to partner with it because they feel it's important for their youth for their students to get involved with mental health education. And we're one of the very few organizations that work with them that actually do the education side of things in mental health rather than the practical side of things, like counseling, for example.
Yeah.
And the workshops are adapted to the school. So say the school wants a workshop on self-love and acceptance, for example. We try and work off what the school wants because they know what they want the most. We don't want to go there and be like, you guys need a workshop on teen depression, suicide, when actually they're needing one on something completely different. So we want to focus on the school as a whole and the pupils as a whole, and see how we can best help them. And we're getting more and more queries about the workshops, asking if we can get them via email, can they send them to the schools? We're trying to get them everywhere as we can. So I definitely feel that it's becoming more out there that mental health education is a thing and is needed because there's so much more behind your basic, I'm sad, I'm happy, I'm angry, I'm frustrated. There's more behind it, There's so much more we never learn about until we experience it ourselves. And that's where you got to start educating from the young grades already in the beginning and start saying to them that, no, yes, you are happy, you are sad, you are angry, but there is more to that. You can be both at the same time. You can have mood swings and so on and so forth.
No, exactly. And speaking of upping this education with people, do you think that a lack of education will lead to stigma? Because I know personally, some people I know are quite put off about talking about mental health and going to therapy and things because one, they're not educated on how it can benefit, and that therapy isn't just for a person with a mental illness, it's also for people who are going through day-to-day struggles and things. So what do you think about the stigma that do you think it goes hand in hand with an education about these kind of topics?
Stigma is a big part of mental health. A lot of, when you hear mental health, something that comes up with it is the stigma attached to it and how difficult it becomes to speak about mental health. And education plays a massive part in breaking the stigma towards mental health. But before I get too far in that, I just want to explain the thing of positive mental health destigmatization and negative mental health destigmatization. So positive mental health destigmatization is basically what you would originally think of as, breaking the stigma attached to mental health. Speaking about how you're feeling, going to see a counselor, making it a thing instead of being like, sorry, I can't come today, I have work to do. Meanwhile, you're actually going to go see a counselor. Stay. Hey, sorry, I can't come today. Going to go see my counselor, or whatever the case may be. Normalizing things like that. That's a positive mental health destigmatization. But looking at the negative mental health destigmatization, that's jokes such as like, we're looking at suicide, for example. And I mean, we've experienced it firsthand at school. At a school I go to, for example, I'm sure everyone has experienced something similar to it, where, for example, you get your maths test back. It's always the one pupil in the class who will joke at someone else and say, go jump out the window, it's a terrible maths mark, or I'm going to go kill myself now because it's maths mark. Yes, it's a joke, you saying it as banter, whatever the case may be, but the problem that lies there is that you normalizing things such as suicide. And that's where the problem lies. Because now if someone had to say, I'm going to kill myself, they probably think they're joking, right? Meanwhile, maybe they're trying to reach out and hint at something, but you're seeing it as a form of banter and a form of joke. So that's, yes, it's breaking the stigma attached to suicide, but in a negative way.
And it can also encourage.
That's where, and you have to start educating people on the difference between the two. And that's also where educational intervention comes into play. So if a teacher hears stuff like that, they got to intervene and educate them on what they're doing, and instead of just ignoring it or shouting at them and punishing them from saying something. You got to educate them, because what's the point of giving a pupil a detention for an hour after school? They're just going to sit there, be angry with the school that they got to sit here and then leave and do it again. But by educating them and teaching it, they have more of a chance of them not doing it again. There is still a chance they're going to go do it again, but you just got to keep educating them until they become fed up, or actually it clicks and they realize what they're doing is wrong. And that's where a lot of the school systems fail, is they don't manage to implement the educational interventions. They're very quick to tell you to cut your hair, or very quick to tell you to shave, whatever the case may be at school. But as soon as you go to them and saying there was this incident or that incident, they try to sweep it under the carpet because they know it's going to look bad for the school. And that's where they start worrying more about how the school looks and how the school appears versus what's going on inside and how the pupils feel.
No, it's very true. And often people will call schools ignorant in that kind of sense, because they're very focused on the image rather than, say, the student's side. And so obviously your organization and you guys do a lot of workshops with schools and things and going to educate. But if people don't have access to resources like you and what you guys do, what ways do you recommend that they educate themselves and help make everyone around them more aware of these kinds of things that we're talking about?
So, I mean, for me, the main, wanting to educate yourself on mental health, the first step would be your vocabulary. Learn what the words mean. I'm sure, a lot of people have access to some sort of internet, Google, or have access to a counseling services, or a school counselor, or a school teacher, maybe, and just have a chat with them to learn what the vocabulary means, or what is depression, what is bipolar, how do I respond to someone who tells me they're feeling suicidal or has schizophrenia or things like that. They got to learn what these words mean, got to learn how to actually ask how someone's feeling and how to respond, because by doing that is a simple step to firstly breaking the stigma, but also comforting people and letting people know that you are there and that you can actually help, while helping yourself at the same time. So you need to learn more about yourself and your own mind and your own body. But I mean, when looking at access to resources, majority of it is on the internet. And unfortunately, we do realize that more than half South Africa doesn't have access to a phone or a laptop or internet. And that's where you got to actually physically distribute these resources of information. But the problem that lies is there that these organizations shouldn't be having to print thousands of copies and going to hand them out. The organization should be focusing on getting the policies implemented into primary schools and high schools and pre-primaries, etc., to teach those grades suited, obviously according to the grade, on different aspects of mental health in this mental health policy. Because it's not enough just saying, yeah, no, we'll educate them. There needs to be an actual thing put into place by the government to make sure that the schools follow through. Because then if the schools are following through by educating their pupils on mental health, there wouldn't be that question of, how do people get more resources on mental health? they should have been educated throughout the years. And I mean, it's a big thing to do and to get done. But once we get that done, a lot of the generations to come will just start to be cut out. But until then, I think it's important that organizations do realize that a lot of people don't have access to internet and are going to have to go to these places, like the workshops that we do, for example. Go to the schools, go to the people, and educate them on it as much as you can.
No, Chris, that's so true. And it's very true in a lot of third world countries like ourselves in South Africa. Most people don't have access. And if they do, it's often very stigmatized in some cultures about opening up and going through these kind of things. And I do think it's so wonderful what you guys are doing, and you're trying to implement these policies and making it like a building block. So once everyone has the base to go off this kind of education, then it's so much better for everyone and going into the future. It's just wonderful. We'll start wrapping up. I'll ask you one more question. What do you see in the positive future in the realm of mental health? What would you like to see all over the world?
I think the main thing that I want to see is people to just actually realize that it's okay to speak about mental health, firstly, and secondly, that if someone has depression, for example, I know the two most commonly used ones, an example is anxiety and depression, and I try to use other examples, but just by using anxiety and depression is the most common ones people know of. But if someone has anxiety, it doesn't change who that person is, and they don't suffer from it or anything. They're living with anxiety, and it's just another building block on that person that you got to learn to accept and understand. And it shouldn't be something that you're scared of. And I think that's where it lies into the stigma. So obviously, just destroy this whole stigma and stop having to refer to it as mental health. It should just be classified as your health, and how you're feeling. And these are all massive, massive steps that can be achieved by just doing these little building blocks, these little, bunny steps of heaps instead of giant leaps of faith, just little ones. And step by step, we will get there. And, people like you and all the other mental health organizations that are out there that are trying to create this dialogue about those little steps and building blocks to create that change and what you want to see.
Thank you, Chris. I think that's so true. Everyone needs to take little steps in themselves. Okay. Thank you so much, Chris, for speaking to us here at Pretty Little Joys. We really appreciate having you, and we're so excited to speak to you again.
Awesome. Well, thank you so, so very much. I really do appreciate it. If anyone does have any questions, our website is just www.swimforchange.co.za. We have our email address and everything on there. We are open to questions, open to answers. Do you want to give us feedback, opinions, anything? Just give us a shout.
And Chris also has Instagram at swimforchange. Is that right? As well?
Yes.
So give them
Thank
a follow.
you.
Give them some love.
That was Chris Keylans, and he concludes our guest speakers on the podcast today. An endless thanks to everyone who helped out with the creation of this podcast. And thank you so much to you, the listeners, for taking the time to listen to this and educating yourself on this serious topic. We really hope you listen to further and past episodes of the Pretty Little Joys podcast and check out our Instagram for weekly posts, stories, and multiple things. You can just check us out. Again, thank you so much for listening, and we really hope you join us and listen to another episode sometime soon.